Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. To give folks a chance to join, we will get started in just a minute. Welcome again, everyone, to TNTP's webinar, Leading Through Uncertainty, How School Districts Are Navigating the Evolving Federal Funding Landscape. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Jim Larson, and I serve on TNTP's Policy and Advocacy team. At TNTP, we bring policy, practice, and research together in the work that we do with our partners in over 4,000 districts and 33,000 schools across 32 states. Over the next hour, we will engage in a conversation on how school districts can navigate the challenges associated with recent and potential changes to federal funding for K-12 education. Here's our agenda for today's webinar. To provide some framing, we will begin with a brief overview of the federal policy landscape for K-12 education, including some recommendations for district leaders on how to navigate it. Then we will hear from our panelists and make space for audience Q&A. Speaking of our panel, we are delighted to be joined today by Dr. 𝗂𝗲𝗿, Superintendent of Rolla Public Schools in Rolla, Missouri, and 𝗂𝗲𝗿, Chief Financial Officer for Detroit Public Schools Community District in Detroit, Michigan. Dr. 𝗂𝗿 has over 28 years of experience in public education. He has served in a central office role since 2008, and in many other positions, including assessment coordinator, athletics and activities director, and administrator. He remains connected to students through his work with the National 𝗂𝗏 Club, serving as the Missouri chair on the National Board of Directors. He strives to model the National 𝗂𝗏 motto, "Let us lead by serving others." In his role as Chief Financial Officer, 𝗂𝗲𝗿 has worked closely with the superintendent and board to balance the district's budget for 8 consecutive years, aligning the budget to strategic priorities while establishing a 20-year facility master plan and identifying $850 million in funding for the plan, and increasing teacher salaries over $25,000. 𝗂𝗲 is a former teacher and principal and is committed to improving educational outcomes for historically underserved communities. I have the pleasure of facilitating today's webinar alongside 2 of my colleagues at TNTP. In a few minutes, you'll hear about TNTP's strategic guidance for district leaders on charting a course through the evolving federal funding landscape from Tony Williams, our Vice President of Finance, and Leticia De La Vara, our Chief of Policy, Engagements, and External Affairs, will be leading our panel discussion and Q&A. To help frame today's conversation, we'd like to start by providing a brief, not exhaustive overview of the federal policy landscape for K-12 education. As we head into the 2025-2026 school year, districts across the country are working to advance their strategic priorities amidst this uncertain federal policy environment. For instance, the release of appropriated funding for certain federal formula grants such as Title II, Title III, and Title IV was delayed by nearly a month. While most federal grants for K-12 education were flat funded year over year, the Department of Education increased funding for the federal charter schools program by $60 million for this fiscal year. The Department of Education has also proposed new priorities for its competitive and discretionary grants. In recent months, the agency has published 4 proposed priorities for public comment: evidence-based literacy, expanding education choice, returning education to the states, and most recently, advancing artificial intelligence in education. And finally, the Department of Education itself has undergone significant changes. At the beginning of this calendar year, roughly 4,100 people worked for the agency. Now, approximately 2,200 people do. The Department of Education is also considering moving certain responsibilities to other federal agencies. For example, last month, Ed announced a workforce development partnership with the Department of Labor that shifts the responsibility for day-to-day administration of Perkins and WIOA funded programs from Ed to Labor. And just over a week ago, the Department of Education sent a letter to state education agency leaders illustrating ways for states to implement existing flexibilities under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and encouraging them to do so. Because of their potential impact on K-12 education, we're closely monitoring 3 federal issues as part of the policy research and analysis that TNTP offers to our partners in states, districts, and organizations. First, the federal budget for fiscal year 2026 and related but separate potential rescissions to K-12 education funding. Second, implementation of certain aspects of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And finally, waivers from the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. First, Congress is currently working to pass an appropriations bill for fiscal year 2026 and may consider a second rescissions package that includes funding for K-12 education. Last Thursday, the Senate Appropriations Committee passed an FY26 budget bill for education in a bipartisan manner. However, the bill has yet to be voted on by the full Senate, and we do not yet know how the House's version will compare. We do know that the budget bill passed by the Senate Appropriations Committee would keep existing federal K-12 grant programs as distinct funding streams, rather than consolidating them as the president's proposed budget requests, along with providing slight increases to funding for Title I and IDEA. We're also following the rollout of numerous components of the Budget Reconciliation Bill, also known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, signed by the president last month. For instance, over the next year and a half, states will have the opportunity to opt in to a new federal tax credit program to expand private school choice before it launches in 2027. And additionally, we're tracking downstream effects of the Budget Reconciliation Bill's impact on Medicaid and SNAP, including on school-based health services and school meal programs. And finally, the Department of Education is publicly encouraging states to submit waiver requests for statutory and regulatory requirements in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. We're paying close attention to how ED responds to these waiver requests from states to determine how they'll impact funding, assessment, and accountability. Now, we'd love to hear from you. As school districts across the country adapt to changing federal policies and funding, what should district leaders prioritize when making budget decisions? Community engagement, state policy and guidance, district-led strategic initiatives, which could be early literacy, career pathways, teacher recruitment and retention, or something else, and state and local partnerships to provide additional resources. Please select the options that resonate with you. You do not need to limit yourself to just one option. Thanks for sharing your perspectives. Yep. As evidenced by the results of this poll, there are many important factors and voices for district leaders to consider as they set their budgets during these uncertain times. And so to round out the framing for today's conversation, I'm going to turn it over to our Vice President of Finance, Tony Williams, to share a bit about TNTP's guidance for district leaders as they traverse the evolving federal funding landscape.
Thank you, Jim, and good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Tony Williams, the Vice President of Finance at TNTP, and I previously served as both a Chief Financial Officer and a Superintendent. So I know firsthand the balancing act of sustaining high-quality teaching and learning and leaning in the face of unpredictable funding. So today I want to offer some strategic guidance on how we as education leaders can navigate this moment of federal funding changes without losing sight on what's most important, which is the commitment to students, teachers, and our schools, and most definitely our communities as a whole. So why does this matter? Why now? We're facing a pivotal inflection point. Federal relief dollars. We've been hearing about 𝗂𝗃 sunsetting for a couple years now. We're still hearing that, right? So the new federal restrictions and political uncertainty are sending ripple effects across states, across districts, across communities. But one thing that remains unchanged, we need professional development for our teachers, our school leaders. That's non-negotiable. It's a foundation to academic recovery, innovation, and long-term success for our students. And yet I've seen dozens and dozens of strategic plans either paused or derailed. Not because we don't have vision, not because we can't dream, not because we can't reimagine, but because of lack of flexibility and unpredictable funding. And this disruption right now during this time is devastating, but it also, on an optimism point, it creates a space to reimagine and to design. So transitioning forward, the strategic opportunity in crisis. There's always an opportunity in crisis. As a former district leader, I've learned the fiscal pressure can actually unlock bold, necessary change if you approach it strategically. We can't afford to operate on autopilot. We must often pause. We must often reassess, assess, and also pivot. Pivot is a key word that as district leaders, we're often doing, right? So in this moment, I have to ask the questions, and I think that we should all ask these questions. Are we getting the return on investment we expected from current spending? That's a pivot. Are there initiatives that we can scale back on or consolidate without compromising the impact to students? Can we structure our investments in a way that builds long-term sustainability, even in the absence of federal windfalls? So the crisis is real, but so is the opportunity to prioritize what works and innovate beyond compliance. Now, thinking about tapping into our federal resources. Thank you, Stephanie. Many leaders right now, all leaders really, have been thinking about 𝗂𝗃. They've been laser focused on the recent restrictions on DEI related initiatives. But 𝗂𝗃 is not the only tool. So I want there to be hope for districts to re-examine the full landscape of federal funding. Programs like Title I-A for disadvantaged students, IDEA, Special Education Services, even Perkins. Think about career and technical education and the funding associated with Perkins. There's also Title V for innovative programs. All hold potential to support similar strategic goals. More importantly, think about stacking funding. There's no one key funding source. So stacking funding, it also creates creativity to support initiatives that are aligned in teaching and coaching and retention, leadership pipeline development, expanded learning opportunities, and also mental health and wraparound support services. We cannot forget that. So funding flexibility isn't always about finding new funds and new dollars. It's about strategic alignment and the courage to redesign how we use sometimes what we already have. Now, this is how we at TNTP can help. We are already partnering with districts across the state, across the country, to navigate new funding realities. We can support you with a return on investment analysis, which helps you evaluate which investments are driving student success. Scenario planning, thinking about multiple funding futures and helping you be proactive rather than reactive to decisions. Funding strategic support, mapping out federal, state, and local funding in your district's core priorities, and sustainability toolkits, which provide frameworks to help you build long-term fiscal strategic thinking and success and protect what most matters, which is student learning. And we do all this in partnership with your teams. We customize our support based on the unique local context. But let me close with this. In moments of uncertainty, leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about making bold strategic choices in service of what matters, which is students. In this moment, I want you to lead with clarity, courage, and conviction I want you to align resources with values and don't be afraid to do that. And ensure that every dollar, every decision, and every initiative that you lead with is real, measurable, and has the impact to the classroom. So, TNTP, we are here to help you navigate the complexity, build those sustainable strategies, and reimagine, which is a word that I often love, in this reality, what is possible. And with that, I will turn it over to our Chief Policy Engagements and External Affairs Officer, 𝗂𝗃𝗲𝗏. But I want to say something about Leticia. They lead TNTP's efforts for galvanizing support, our system-wide redesign. They lead the policy agenda, coalition building. Leticia oversees TNTP's public voice, thought leadership, and engagement strategy. Leticia is deeply rooted in community development, public affairs, and equity-centered leadership. Leticia will bring a powerful lens to today's conversation as we navigate to our panelists. So, Leticia, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Tony. That was very nice. Tony is phenomenal leader at TNTP, and thank you so much for sharing the oversight on the ways we really do hope to help folks across the country as we navigate a changing education landscape. I want to go back a little bit to the policy overview that Jim shared a few minutes ago. We know that this has real and immediate implications for millions of students in thousands of districts across the country. And we know there's a lot of headlines about that. But we really want to get deeper than the headline and really get into what does this actually mean on the ground. And TNTP, we're fortunate to work with schools and districts in many states so when changes like these occur, we actually think through and center our students and the communities, and we're cognizant of what the educators and leaders who serve them, what they're managing through these conditions and through these changes. So that's what brings us to our panel discussion today, which I'm very excited about. We have two really phenomenal district leaders who are coming in, sharing how they're preparing for the upcoming school year. I know many of us have already started the school year. Some of us are beginning the school year. So they're going to share a little bit about that and how they're thinking through these changes in federal education administration. Also, I will hear from them what their factors they're holding closest to guide their decision making, because it's not just about the decision. It's like what are the parameters you set as you make decisions. And we want to dive in a little bit deeper today. Have you all, many of you joining the call, are district and school leaders yourselves. So we really see this as a peer-to-peer conversation to just really hear, how are you navigating? What are the questions you're thinking through as you prepare your administrators, your leaders, your teachers to come into a new school year and be excited and be ready to be front and center and focused on making sure children advance academically in the new school year. So again, we have a lot of folks on the call. Thank you for joining us. I'd encourage you to share questions. We'll have after we hear from each one of our panelists, we'll have a little bit of a Q&A. So you have a Q&A button on your screen, and we'd encourage you to take some time now, and as you're hearing them talk, chat in your questions to the Q&A button, and we'll make sure we bring those up as we open up for discussion. But Dr. Dare, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited. I'm very excited to have a chance to chat with you. And I'll start with a question that's actually to both of you. As I mentioned, like the first day of school for students, just a couple weeks away for you both. And there is a kind of continued uncertainty around federal funding for K-12. I'd love to hear from each one of you the core beliefs that are anchoring your thinking and decision-making about your fiscal priorities for the upcoming school year and even beyond. And either one of you can jump in, whoever would like to jump in first.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Well, I think one of my sort of things as I think about the role is, how do I ensure that teachers, principals can focus on their job? And so we've been talking about this uncertainty for a while, and we've done the numbers. We know everything's going to be okay. Don't think about this. Don't think about all the stuff that's going on. The kids are going to show up. We have 50,000 kids who are going to arrive. We have 7,000 employees. So making sure that they have a great experience is what I'm thinking about for day one. Some of the things that we've done to be prepared for that is, do we have enough cash? Yes, we have enough cash. worst case scenario, can we afford any cuts that come? Yes, we can afford that in worst case. So we may have to plan, but that doesn't impact the teachers, the students, the community that show up. So for day one, let's make sure we have 100% of our positions filled. So we're actively recruiting, trying to find great teachers. Let's make sure all the training, professional development, the buses, all the systems are working, because schools are very complex. And then we'll have a great start to the school year.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and would add to that. You know, we always use this mantra. I'm sure most of you do. Students first, always. Right? We're going to take care of those kids, and that means taking care of our people and our staff as well, so they can take care of the kids. You know, we're positioned as well. I love the question about, you know, the priorities, and those federal and state regulations are always important. We can't ignore those, but those local priorities, we've done the work, we've built the systems, we've created the buy-in. So we're going to continue living our mission and vision, and moving forward in that regard.
I appreciate that. I actually really appreciate you both said students first always, and we're making sure that the students are still going to show up. Like, I think that is actually lost in the headlines. Like, we talk about dollars, and we talk about, you know, acronyms and the alphabet soup of all these different federal programs. But at the end of the day, it's the kids who are coming into the classroom, and they're not really worried about that they're coming in excited to learn, excited for a new school year. So anchoring on that as what you need to be focused on, I think, is just so important, and really true testament to, you know, why folks are called to this profession. Jeremy, I'd like to just kind of follow up with you. I know that in recent years, the Detroit Public Schools have made many strategic investments in staff development. So could you talk to me a little bit about the core beliefs that you described, some of the core beliefs that frame some of your decision making, but how that informs your planning as it relates to staff development in the school years?
Well, we started in the conversation about return on investment, and one of the first things we know generally, and we've seen in our data, is that great teachers get great results for kids, and so we got to make sure that we have great teachers, great principals, great support staff, and so the investments that we've made in high quality instructional materials, professional development for staff so that they know how to use them, looking at our survey data and getting that feedback to continue to make the right investments. So whether that is summer boot camp for brand new teachers that we have that's kicking off, I believe, next week for them for a couple weeks before school starts. That's something we added in. Leveraging some of our Title II money. We've also started a Grow Your Own program using some of our Title II money, just because there's the shortage of teachers. And so we've recruited about 200 teachers through that program, mostly paras, assistant interventionists into that role. That's really helped. But looking on the return of investment for programs, and then looking at what the data is saying, both from the staff, how they view the development, and then what are the results showing with these programs that we're making investments in. Not all of them, we haven't continued all of them. There's some that we've invested in and we just haven't seen much progress, and so we've shifted. But I think it's always looking at the data, looking at the outcomes, and multiple data points to make those decisions.
Thank you. And the feedback you're hearing from staff on some of these shifts that you're making, how's that gone?
You know, I think one of the big things for Detroit is there's a lot of needs, and the needs aren't changing. And so it's like the high quality instructional materials are great. We're seeing our tier 3 students really start to move in some big growth areas there, but there's more kids than ever who have high needs, and the trying to sort of build some wraparound services to how there's a push from the community, there's a push from the schools about what are the other services that we're doing. The percent of homeless kids that we have has significantly increased over the last 18 months. The number of kids and families indicating questions about like food resources, which start to get outside of the bubble of K-12. We're trying to focus on educating kids, but how do you do that when you got to look at the wraparound? So we've been piloting these health hubs. We have 12 of them launched across the city, trying to expand those more, and then work more again with some of the city services to like link resources. So that's been a big push on us, and us stepping into a couple areas, new areas, and trying to balance that with what could be some funding shortfalls coming into the future, and how much can we do, but also recognizing that if kids are hungry, if kids don't have a safe place to sleep, it's going to be difficult for them to be successful in school. And trying to partner with some of our partners, nonprofits, other health entities, to do some of that also behavioral health supports in the school for kids.
Thank you for that. Dr. Chair, I want to turn to you. I was just thinking through some of the guiding principles you shared in the first question, and we know that teacher professional learning and coaching on early literacy is a major priority for Rolla Public Schools. You shared that kind of when we were talking through this conversation. How did the guiding principles that you mentioned earlier anchor your planning for early literacy for the upcoming school year?
Yeah, sure. So, I think, again, trying to put the needs of the kids out there. We've recognized this need. We've got some state initiatives going on. TNTP has been a great partner to help launch us forward through that process. But I think it's really getting to what those needs are. And if we're going to support our faculty and staff in that process, kind of building off some of the things Jeremy said with professional development, we've really tried to tailor that professional development. So it's pretty easy to step back and say, our automotive guys at the career tech school don't need the same training as the kindergarten teacher. But get within the building, our kindergarten music teacher doesn't need the same training as our kindergarten classroom teacher. But then one more step, or multiple more steps, our traditionally trained first-year kindergarten teacher does not need the same professional development and growth as an alternatively certified grow your own type program teacher. So really trying to get down to the level of where are we getting our biggest return on investment, but also providing what those kids need in terms of the bigger picture, and trying to keep everybody moving in that same path.
That's great. That it made me think of our passive opportunity paper, where it's not just about the training, it's about differentiating to the needs of the person. That's not just a student, that's the educator as well. And every educator comes in with their own skill sets and their own experiences. So their needs are different. And it's an opportunity also not just for the training, but for them to see themselves as valued by the district and by the school that they're a part of, as saying they're invested in my growth, which I think is a really strong opportunity to retain quality teachers. So really great to hear that. The next question I'd say is for both of you, but I'll start with you, Jeremy. While you're working to ensure that educators and students have a strong start to the fall, we know you're also planning for the next school year. It's not just about what happens right now, it's what happens next. So as you grapple with the potential impact of additional changes to federal funding, and also possible state level budget shifts, how are these kind of unpredictable, uncertain conditions informing your approach? You mentioned earlier, like knowing the cash now, but how are these informing your approach to planning for school years further down the road?
Absolutely, great question. I think school education and school funding is complicated, restricted, unrestricted, fiscal years, timing of when money is. And so trying to, more this year than in the past, demystify this. I think we'd had a couple years where it was kind of stable and we were just running things. And so you didn't have to do as much engagement in the community. And I think it's going to be critical this year, because anytime you're talking about taking away, it's a pressure point, and someone's going to be upset by that. And so how do you effectively explain the moving pieces, explain the decisions that are being made, or how are you getting input into that decision? So normally we wouldn't start rolling out the budget development till November, December timeframe, but we're starting now. Actually, this afternoon, we're kicking off budget forecasting for next year already. And how are we going to try to take some of the investments and make them real? So we have these 200 plus academic interventionists we've hired who are doing high dosage tutoring for students. So what's the cost per student in terms of the value around that? Because you can say, all right, that's a $12 million investment and we have an $18 million investment in attendance agents, but those numbers get too large. Mm-hmm. And so trying to create impact at a more per student level is how we're thinking about it, to try to frame some choices so we can then go out to the community, talk about everything we're doing, talk about priorities, that if we have to make hard choices, where are we going to make that? What's their views? Are there things that we're not doing that we should do? To hear that as well. So we can bring all that and start to move forward with our board earlier engaging in a budget, because ultimately we're required by state law to have a budget adopted by next June 30th. And it has to be balanced, whether we know the inputs or not. And so if we can effectively communicate, we can effectively inform people the things that we are doing, the costs, the trade-offs that are coming, then hopefully that will give the community a better chance to weigh in and provide us the feedback. And they may not like it, but if they understand, they may be more willing to support the hard choices that have to go. I think the last thing we want to do is be fighting with our constituents and pitting academic intervention against attendance agents, against food for kids versus transportation. I mean, they're all needed. How are we going to balance all these? So that's, as I'm thinking about it, what I'm planning for. Very specifically, I am planning for the federal government to cut Title III at a minimum. I don't expect that to continue. I think more than likely Title II could get cut, whether it's a rescission this year or it's just not included in next year's budget. I'm being conservative. I don't think it will go forward. I think Title I will stay, but potentially maybe some cuts. So I'm going to build a plan for a conservative budget. So we can make sure that we are investing in those core areas and we don't get into a last minute where we needed this money, we don't have it. And now, because I think that's the biggest disservice we can do. In August, now we're disrupting schools, we're disrupting staff. We got a plan. If we are going to have to make changes, let's do it early. Let's communicate to people so they can know what's going to happen. And if I'm wrong and we get the extra money, great. We add the services back.
Dr. Dare, anything you'd add about the way you're approaching it for the years?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, Jeremy. We often talk about, what's your plan B? What's your plan B if plan A doesn't go through? I think in these times, maybe we're talking about plans A through Z, right? This is best case scenario, this is worst case scenario, likely going to be somewhere in between. I agree with Jeremy. I don't think this is over. We're going to see changes, cuts, reductions, shifts, something out of this. That's historical. So it's likely to be the case. So the challenge, I think, for every district is figuring out what that means for your district. What are your core pieces? What are the things that you can maybe shift or give up? What are the things that you cannot? And how do you backfill and plan in the background for that? I'll use Title III as an example. This is one we've had a lot of conversations in our area around recently. If you go a couple of hours south of us, it's a heavy farming area, lots of migrant workers, but Title III in that area looks like Hispanic migrant farm worker programs. You go a couple of hours north of us, there's some refugee pockets. So those school districts are dealing with particular entities, particular nationalities that are very specific to that community. We have a major science and tech university here in our community. And so we have 60 some nationalities in our building, but most of them are professors' kids. And they bring a whole unique set of challenges in their expectations from their families. So our approach to Title III is going to look different than those other districts and how they're going about that. So saying all that to say, we've urged caution with our team behind the scenes and have encouraged them to think through some planning. What would it look like if we needed to shift? What would it look like if we need to pivot and start to build some of those plans so that we're not caught off guard, caught last minute. We want to have a plan that's sustainable to go forward.
So I would love to stay with this just a little bit longer, Dr. Dare, because it makes me think of like your community is seeing local industries expand. So with that, I'm sure you're seeing the rural school districts is probably seeing an increase in student enrollment as those industries expand. As your community grows, how are you approaching family and community engagement? I'm just thinking about what you said, Jeremy, about communicating changes around potential changes to academic and extracurricular programming based on shifts in federal funding for K-12. You have the school population growing, but also like there's real uncertainties that you're navigating with. So how are you navigating that?
Yeah, we are very fortunate in that we are fighting this battle of growth. It's a good thing. The university has announced a major expansion. We have a lot of industry in our community expanding. Housing is exploding because of those things, which is all great, but bring their own unique challenges. We're looking at all of this, all the federal impacts, everything as an opportunity to do more education. And I think we do a pretty good job with our parents. We're looking to go further than that. So We've created a Citizens Academy. We're going to bring in a group of people, some key business people, to do some periodic educational pieces in the hopes that as they go out in the community, they can help share our messaging and at the very least curb misinformation, arm them with the facts and things that they need. But we have a whole series of things planned for this year, bringing community members together, talking about myths and debunking some of the misinformation out there, but educating them on what we're doing and the decisions we're making, why we're making those, why we're being pushed into those decisions, and what the ramifications are long term. So we're trying to treat it as an opportunity and hope that we can engage our community more beyond just our parents.
Appreciate that. Jeremy, I'm gonna, because you said it as well, I want to ask the same kind of question. If you've talked about sharing and highlighting some of these difficult decisions that need to be made as you think about federal funding shifts. So I know Detroit Public Schools is already thinking about the importance of coalition building. I kind of heard it in your answer, to inform stakeholders about the difficult choices the districts could be facing due to federal changes. I think I even saw this in some of the questions coming in from our audience. So thank you for putting in those questions. Continue to use that Q&A button. Jeremy, recognizing that there's more changes to federal funding for K-12 education that we may not know, things that are on the horizon, how are you specifically thinking about family and community engagement in this space?
Yeah, I saw that question. So a couple things. So leveraging like our current partners. So we one of the priorities of the superintendent when he joined about 9 years ago now was each school creating a PTA, a parent, a school advisory council as well. And they have a review process in our budget and the school budget development, so that we already have some avenues that we do. And you can argue more, some are better, some are stronger than others. But first and foremost, how are we engaging our principals as leaders and understanding this? So they're key, them then to their school communities and engaging those local parents at that level. So that's one path. It's going to be, we're going to be expanding it. Normally we do it every year, but really trying to expand it earlier. So rather than just looking at the budget the principals developed, engaging earlier on in some of the decision making and getting some survey data back. We learned this through the pandemic that our communities actually engage really well in teams. So we would go from maybe we're doing meetings where there's 5 or 10 people who come in person, and we do an online Teams meeting at a school, and there's 40 or 50 parents who are now engaged and listening. And so our ability to get survey data from each of the school meetings, as well as when we do district-wide, has been greatly increased. So standardizing some of that to get some of that survey data back, so we can have that. I think that's one pathway. The other, I think, key pathways really for our partnerships, community partnerships team, are who are those other large community groups that are out there, and then we have a number of them that are they're strong, they've got a voice, they've engaged, engaging with them. I think sometimes we engage with them well. We've done it a lot during the pandemic when we were trying to ensure and get food out and support families, getting laptops and other things, but engaging with them in ways to hear from their constituencies. Some of them have kids in the school system, some of them don't. So that's a pathway of thinking about. And the other one that we've already been working on is working with our funders. So there's a foundation coalition of funders that are out there who have some vested interest in some of the things that we've been doing, and talking to them and being really frank about, hey, this is the reality that we're operating in. We had this conversation yesterday. We've made big investments into robotics, STEM, some other great programs. Forget kids. We may not be able to continue those. And talking to GM and others about, all right, we're unable to continue those. Would you continue those programs as we try to like put things together? So I think it's various different messages for various different audiences. You leveraging your staff, principals key, partnerships team key, the funding development people key, and what's the message that we need to get in from each of them, and then also hearing back from them. So we're not just one-sided only telling, we have ways to receive that feedback. And I think what we've got to do right now is really try to get some of the information distilled down and some key messages. So we can talk about, again, what are the big investments we've made. I know there were some questions about technology. We've made big investments into moving to digitized curriculum. So there's a digital copy of every single textbook, so families can access it at home, all these things. Is that a priority that we continue to do in the future? Do we scale that back? Because it's parents aren't valuing it as much. But again, we gotta understand it, quantify it, and then make it available for feedback.
Thanks for that. I'm seeing a lot of questions come through. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A button on the webinar link to make sure that that gets routed so we can pull that in. And because of that, and I know folks, I mean, there's a lot of district leaders on the call, and this is really the point of it. Like Dr. I think you mentioned when we were doing some prep, like it's just kind of nice to hear, like even if it sounds like, oh yeah, I've thought about it, it's kind of nice to hear other folks in your field are also thinking about it in the same way. So thank you both for sharing that. I want to kind of combine these last couple of questions into one for the sake of time. So Dr. Darrell, I'll start with you, but the question will be for both of you. So heard a lot about how you're thinking about planning. Obviously, there's a lot of experience you're bringing to it as you both have held your roles. So I'd love for you to share as we close out this portion and get into Q&A. What's one piece of advice you'd want to offer to other district leaders? And then secondly, what's giving you optimism, joy, excitement about the upcoming school year? So Dr. Darrell, I'll start with you, and then Jeremy, if you could follow up as well.
Yeah, sure. I think this may be the easiest question of the whole thing, so that's good. I think the piece of advice I would say is be open, be transparent, educate your people, internal and external. Don't assume your internal people know all these details, because they don't. So educate your people, but don't sensationalize, don't make threats. Don't go out and say we're going to cut all of our athletics if we don't get this. Don't do any of that. Just be honest and direct. And it's okay if you don't know answers. I think our public needs to know this is the information we have. We don't know what that means at this time, because we don't have the final outcomes. We're looking at all potential scenarios. We're trying to evaluate what the impact would be, but we don't know what the final outcome will be and what the impact will be. So I think just be open, honest, direct, and communicate often. That's the advice I would give. The hopefulness is kind of building on what Jeremy said. Public education has been somewhat attacked, I'll just use that word, as of late, seems like, in many different forms. But we have a lot of champions in our corner. We have local community people, we have agencies, we have people in power who believe in what we do and support what we do. And so it's easy to get sucked into the negative. But what gives me hope is that we have people who recognize that we're in a little bit of a unique situation right now, and they're stepping forward and they're saying, what can I do to help? How can we support you? How can we help with your messaging? How can we advocate for you? So build on those partnerships. Every community has somebody. Use those folks. They want to help you. They want to help your community grow your educational programs. So that's my hope, is that we're able to build more on the positives.
Thanks. Jeremy?
I concur with what Dr. Dare said. I would say also just stay calm. Don't overreact. Someone asked a question about it being similar to COVID. And in many ways, this is just the amount of information that's coming to you all at once. What's true, what's not, emergency orders, budget cuts. Stay calm. Don't overreact. Don't move when you know. Always be learning, continuing to respond, but stay focused on the first day of school that's coming up. Stay focused on the things that matter, that you can control. A lot of the stuff we can't control, and we're not going to react till we find out. And we know it's been through law, it's been litigated. We know what the new law is that we have to conform to, and we're going to comply with the law. And I think from a hopeful standpoint, I'm still hopeful for the impact. So Detroit has a history of, like, in the last 8 years, of seeing academic growth. We've responded from the pandemic. We are now beating the highest performance we've had in the last 30 years. So really building on that foundation and continuing to grow it. I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about the graduation rates that we have this year now. We're at the state average and exceeding that. And so again, a lot of the areas and seeing them move in the right direction, in particular our neighborhood schools, not our exam schools, the schools with our neighborhood students are seeing some of our best growth. So the students who need it the most are seeing it. So that makes me feel good, and I'm looking forward to another great year and seeing kids and staff deliver. So thank you.
That's great. No, really, really enjoyed this conversation, hearing both of your perspectives, right? And even right now, as you're saying, like there is a lot out there, and it's very easy to focus on what's on fire, but just being really true to what you know to be true and what you know about your district, about your teams, about your staff, and about the kids and families that you serve. Like it helps ground in what are we going to do for them. And I think that's the takeaway we want to make sure we're always working through. And it's I saw in some of the questions here that it's a great reminder. 5 years ago, we were in another space of uncertainty. Everybody was, knocked sideways with COVID. Nobody was planning that. And I know that the circumstances are different compared now to then. But what lessons learned from that time are you bringing in as you navigate this time and make decisions with another level of uncertainty?
I I'll just jump. I think that's a great question. I think Jeremy hit it in his last comment. It's that flexibility and not overreacting, right? We're gonna get something and we're gonna deal with it. We're gonna have to pivot. We're gonna have to adjust. We may have to do something we're uncomfortable with. There will be things that come out of that, but we can do it. The piece I would say to that, the thing that I think we learned the most is bringing everybody to the table. So everybody has a voice, everybody has a solution, everybody has input, and bringing everybody together to help solve that for that buy-in and that community piece is the key.
The only thing I would add is as we did in COVID, just making sure that we continue to protect the most vulnerable. I think about right now and the attacks around our immigrant students and sort of what that's going to mean and how. And our trans students, there's a number of attacks of kids being marginalized and separated. And so our job is to continue to protect the most vulnerable. We provide public education to all students in Detroit. We don't get to select. And so we're going to continue to provide public education to every student and ensure people feel safe, welcome in our schools.
Great. And thank you for naming. I saw that in a few questions here, so thank you for naming that. I'd love to hear from the both of you how your districts are leaning on their principals to lead in this moment. It's not just what happens at the district campus, it's also what happens at the school campus. So are school leaders being empowered in new or different ways? Do you see them as being nimble during this time? And federal funding is relatively unpredictable this year than in the past. So how are they stepping into this space as they lead their campuses?
I can start. I think one thing we've tried to just continue to remind them, nothing's happened, nothing's changed, continue to operate until you receive guidance from us. From ICE raids and like logistics and procedures in terms of how do you operate. Here are the logistics, here's what the law says, here's what you have to do. And then continue to focus on teaching and learning in your building has been the key. We will be engaging principals, not yet. We want them to focus on the start of school. It's all about timing. Like you can only do so many things at once. Focus on the start of school. We are working on our messaging, plan to engage around October with them to start thinking about, all right, how do we engage in these budget conversations so they can engage with parents? But start of the school is start of the school. And we'll keep focusing on that. So I think just when's the right time, engaging them 100%. They're the leader of the building. They are the experts. And we did this coming out of ESSER. We had to make cuts coming out of ESSER. We engaged them. We got feedback. We'll engage them again in a similar process.
Yeah, I would just add, I think engagement is the key there. And we're in a unique situation right now where we've had a lot of administrative turnover due to retirements and things these past few years. So we have veteran educators, but relatively new administrators for the most part. So this is kind of their first, for the most part, their first opportunity to go through a process like this. So we're trying to do our part to make sure we are educating, but very much to the point, not right now. We have other priorities. We're going to get school started. We're going to get things going, and then we'll come back together and work as a team to work through those things.
Thanks. And I did see this both on the general chat and the Q&A, so I just want to bring it into the conversation. How are you approaching, and Jeremy, you spoke a little bit about this, so I did hear it from you, but how are you approaching serving immigrant students in this current moment? How are you all thinking through that as you come into the new school year?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, our situation is probably a little bit unique in that regard. we've tried to stress to all of our people and our parents that our goal is to provide that safe environment for all of our kids, no matter their background, no matter their history, no matter what. We want to give them all. We want them to feel safe when they're here. We want them to be excited about being here and learning. And so we've tried to be open and make sure we're listening to those communities about their concerns. We've adjusted some things around transportation. We've adjusted some things around after-school activities, just to help ease minds, if nothing else. But we've tried to stress to all of our educators that it take care of the kid. That's what we're here to do, is take care of the kid. So whatever that means, that's
Right.
what we got to do.
Anything you wanted to add to that, Jeremy, or?
No, I agree. We got to take care of our kids, and the law hasn't changed. We're required to educate every kid. So, again, we're going to continue to do what the law says, and I think that's important. And our school district has made a very firm stance about protecting students, protecting the rights of students, and so. I'm supportive of our board. I'm supportive of our superintendent. And if Title III funds get cut, if the state is proposing to cut funds for English language learners in the state of Michigan, then we're still required to do that. That means the general fund is going to have to take on that obligation. And then you start having to make hard choices around the general fund. Especially, we haven't talked about this, but as Medicaid funding over the next couple of years is reduced, number of kids eligible are reduced, that's funding special education. We're still legally required to provide special education services. If we don't get that funding, the general fund has to pick those costs up. And that's the conversations that the community needs to understand, that this is going to have a real impact over time, and it's going to force some hard decisions. So again, it's the communication, is providing the information in ways that people can understand.
Thank you for that. I have two more questions I'm going to try and sneak in before we have to shift to the next part. This has been really great. And thank you to the folks on the line who are attending, because these have been really great questions and really helpful. Dr. Dare, this question I wanted to actually pose to you. There's a question in the chat about wondering if you've seen more collaboration among rural schools. Are they pulling resources together? Are they thinking through joint professional development? Like, how are rural communities responding to these shifts? And is there anything you'd like to share from that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was part of my background. I started out at a smaller district, and so very much so by somewhat by force, but somewhat by I think just a different mentality maybe amongst school leaders coming through the system now. But in our area particularly, there's a lot of very small schools, and so in the interest of professional development in those pieces, we see schools who have one high school science teacher or one high school physics teacher. And so as you're looking to mentor that person and give them a chance to have professional development and colleagues, we're providing some additional opportunities outside of what the state provides for them to interact with each other, to go visit those schools, go see another teacher teaching physics, get out of your classroom a little bit and collaborate with your colleagues. But it goes beyond that. So I think instructionally, I think we're in a good place, but we're starting to do more collaboration around those other pieces, things similar to what Jeremy mentioned, the social emotional pieces, the food insecurities, some more community development type things where we're coming together as counties and as bigger regions to address some of those pieces, because pulling our resources, we're able to have a bigger impact. So that's definitely a thing. And I would encourage you, just have those conversations. Everything we've done has come out of conversation. There's been no formal process. There's no magic answer out there. It's just, hey, we have this, you have this. Can we figure out a way to make those work together? So
it's the age-old question too. That's not new for this environment, I know. So, but going back to it, and you both have talked about it, it is an unpredictable fiscal environment. We talked a little bit about, the tools and the resources to support educators. How are you thinking about, this is a question I saw come in, how are you thinking about the products and services that your district invests in to support leaders and educators, and things like ed technology products, given the unpredictability of this fiscal environment?
To start, I think unfortunately for those listening, I think discretionary is always the easiest cut to make. And whether it's we're going to wait a year, and so instead of refreshing laptops on a 3-year cycle, we're going to go to a 4-year cycle and delay it there. If it's we had digital license and book license, we're going to phase out digital license and just go the book, the print. Because again, there's a lot of contracts. Making decisions to lay off people is always hard, especially in smaller communities, but even in Detroit, like they're our workforce. The people we are laying off are the parents, the kids who are coming to school when you make those hard decisions. And again, that's never easy. Sometimes it has to be done, but I do think there will likely be less investment in new technologies. More, we're not going to get rid of our interim assessments. We're not going to get rid of some of the benchmarking things we do. We use a number of other tools. We'll try to hold on to the ones that have been shown growth, but I don't expect us to be expanding into new softwares. I don't expect us to be piloting new things. Again, if they're free, great. But I don't think that we'll be making those investments. And I think we'll be trying to squeeze the discretionary a lot, especially at the same time we're facing inflation's coming. I mean, there's the inflationary pieces are going to be there. And so that's just going to limit what we can do.
Yeah, I think 2 specific things that will probably guide our building leaders, especially down, is one is, the answer may be no in a lot of circumstances, but it doesn't have to just be a hard no. It can be a no, not right now. We may have to wait and see what the final outcome of the funding is. If there's funds available later, maybe we revisit. Or no, I can't do that, but I can meet you halfway and we can do something, or I can connect you with an outside resource, whatever. So the answer no may be still the final outcome, but we can work on how we're presenting that and how we're working with people to do that. The other piece I would say to that is shifting the mentality, because as we're growing and facing those challenges, some of our discussions will be, if we're going to add this, what are we able to give up in place of that? So if we're shifting to a new technology or something, can we give up something else that we're doing to allow that shift in funding rather than additional funding? And those are long-term conversations. Those aren't things that happen to the point made earlier. We can't wait till June to make those decisions, have those discussions. Those start now for next year. So.
Thank you. So we're going to close out the Q&A part, but any last thing you hope the audience takes away from some of the messages you shared today? Anything you'd like to kind of underscore or make sure they walked away with from this conversation?
Lean on your colleagues. That would be my advice. We're all in this together. And while each school is unique, we all have similar challenges and similar things, and people will get creative. There will be opportunities to get through this. It cycles. I've been through this before. I'm old, so I've seen this before. We survived it. We made it through. It's uncomfortable and it's difficult, but it's doable. But you are going to lean on your colleagues a lot.
Yeah, I think beg, borrow, steal. If you find somebody who's got a great presentation template and steal it, use it. You don't reinvent the wheel. Where you can get the summary, especially for smaller districts, you don't have staff to have everyone following everything. There's a lot of free Ed Council, I think, has got a bunch of free policy stuff that's on there that you can just get updated. And so I think that, and stay calm. As Dr. Dare said, this has happened before. It's happened multiple times. We'll get through this. But I also think we in education, sometimes we make sure everything's okay, which we should. But when you cut public funding for education, it is going to have an impact on kids. And we have to communicate that effectively, because if we believe in public funding, then we have to fund it and support it. And that our constituents need to know that, voters need to know that. So when people are like, let's cut public schools, okay, well, that's going to mean something. Larger class sizes, smaller, no raises for teachers, closing school buildings, not doing maintenance, not having some of the other things. There will be a real cost. And I think we do a disservice if we just say, oh, we're going to lose $20 million, everything will be okay. We can't do that. At the same time, we still have to keep supporting schools so they will keep going, but it does mean something.
Thank you. So as we close out today's webinar, I just like to take some time again to thank both Dr. Dare, Jeremy, for joining us today and being candid with your insights and your conversation and illustrating how you're both navigating through this uncertainty, it's real, right? There's no way around it. But it's also an opportunity. And that's what I heard consistently throughout the conversation. It's not just about what is the problem, but how are we going to tackle that? What needs to be true for our students and families and teachers and educators in the building? How are we going to move forward on that? It's time, really. I think you both spoke to this, for bold leadership, for strategic partnership, and that, as you both said, an unwavering commitment to the needs of young people and the families that surround them. So we need to ensure that every dollar spent leads to meaningful impact in classrooms. And even if you're not sure where that dollar is going to come from, it doesn't matter. The end goal is that these kids get the education that they deserve, and that every student gets that high quality education that will lead to economic and social mobility for them. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to join us. I hope our audience, I know they did. I saw from the emojis that are still coming through, like how much what you shared was resonating with them. There is a lot going on. We have a lot of changes in federal policy on the horizon, not just what we've gone through in the last few months, but on the horizon. So as we get into the FY26 federal budget rescissions, the rollout of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and the ESCA waivers, we know the next 6 to 12 months will add more volatility, more change, and more uncertainty to the landscape that you all as district leaders are navigating. So as such, we hope for those of you that joined that today's webinar really resonated with you. We see this as the first in a series of conversations that TNTP will host during the school year and beyond to elevate how districts are leading with resiliency, with strategic thought, and with the focus on the student ever present. So we also want to be that strategic partner to help you navigate that evolving policy landscape, determining the impact to your local context, and developing clear, sustainable strategies to align your investments with instructional priorities and goals for student learning. We're here for you. If you'd like to connect, please share your contact information with us. You'll get a feedback survey as you wrap up and close out of the webinar. You can also, I think we might even have that in the chat. I also just want to thank you for showing that this matters. We had a wonderful turnout of attendees who got to hear from two phenomenal district leaders. So thank you for coming. Thank you for asking the great questions. And I hope that you'll share some feedback as you get the survey. We want to continue offering this type of information to strengthen the supports we offer to you and your school communities. We are here for you and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day.